This is Haibike's brand new electric mountain bike for 25-26 and it's called the Tronic, and it's using Pinion's MGU, the motor and gearbox all in one. Haibike's new all-mountain bike is built around a full carbon frame, 160mm of travel and some really innovative drivetrain technology. It's designed to be versatile, fast and capable on technical descents, but efficient and comfortable for long days in the saddle. Travel is 160mm front and rear, handled by a RockShox Zeb Ultimate fork and a Super Deluxe air shock. It rolls on a mullet wheel setup, 29 up front, 27.5 out the rear, giving it a nice mix of stability and agility on the trail. Geometry is up to date with a 64-degree head angle, 78-degree seat tube, and the weight, even with the big battery and the Pinion MGU, stays around 24.4 kilos, which is pretty impressive for a full power bike with a big battery and this motor gearbox unit. So the Pinion MGU has 85 Nm of torque and 600 watts of peak power. It uses a Gates belt drive instead of a chain and derailleur, and the whole system is designed to be ultra low maintenance. It's constantly lubricated, being a closed system, and it's got smart electronic shifting built in. The 800 watt-hour battery is integrated into the down tube and is removable via a locking cover. The frame itself is made in Portugal, and the design is sharp and clean and well finished. Up top, we've got a tidy integrated display, and it's using Pinion's new mode controller, which is a lot more minimal and modern, and it's easy to use. I'm testing the Tronic here in Finale Ligure, one of the best places in the world for all mountain riding. Big climbs, rough descents and technical single track. It's the ideal proving ground for a bike like this. Now personally, I'm a massive fan of the Pinion MGU. I've owned one myself, and I think it is such a great piece of technology for electric bikes because everything is integrated into the gearbox. The whole drive unit contains a 12-speed gearbox and an e-bike motor. And it's great that all the weight is slung super low, and it's kind of where you want it. Even in some of the downhill World Cup races, they're adding weights to the bottom of the bike because this is the best place for the balance on the bike and the center of gravity to be. And we lose all of the mass on the rear. There's no big derailleur or heavy cassette hanging off the back, and all of that mass is moved into the center of the bike. So what that should do is make the rear feel nice and agile and active as it's moving through the travel. And if you're riding in a rooty or rocky location, catching a mech can be a ride ender. So we've got none of that on here. We've just got the Pinion MGU and a belt. Now the belt is from Gates, it's a carbon belt, and it's designed to last thousands and thousands of miles. In fact, there's people that have done round the world rides just using a single belt. And the motor hardly needs any maintenance at all. It needs an oil change once every 10,000 kilometers, and it takes about 10 minutes. So there's no like cleaning down and degreasing and re-lubing. You can just ride this in pretty much any weather and put it away again. In fact, the only maintenance you need to do on the drive unit is just occasionally hose it down with some water if there's any like grit or mud or debris on it. But I've lived with one of these systems for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers personally, and I really have enjoyed the performance from it. Now they're not perfect. There's a couple of clunks within the gearbox in between gears 4 and 5 and 8 and 9 when it's moving effectively like a double shift like you'd get with a front chainring and a rear cassette. So there is some clunk and a little bit of lag between those two gears. And between gears 1 and 4, it is really noisy. So I actually find myself only using those in the steepest climbs and then shifting to gear 5 just when I'm cruising along on normal trails, because the gearbox ratio is 600%. To give you a comparison, a normal SRAM cassette is like 10 to 52, which is a 520% range. So this 600% range gearbox is eclipsing pretty much everything else on the market. So in gear 1, it's for like almost super vertical stuff. And in that gears 1 to 4, you've got up to around 160 Newton meters in torque. Now, with all of that torque on tap, this is exactly the type of climb where it matters. This section here is known locally as the impossible climb. It's a steep, loose, technical grind up. It's a brutal test, not just of motor power, but of bike traction, control and balance. The surface is mixed with sharp rocks, dust, roots, and it only goes steeper the further you go. It's a type of climb where most riders would be off and pushing, and to be fair, on many bikes, so do I. But climbs like this are exactly why I come to Finale. It's not just the descents, it's the challenge of getting up to the top. And climbs like this are always a good way of figuring out what is helping and what might be holding you back. So since I last rode this Pinion motor, there's been a couple of significant updates. The first one is it's now got overrun. So you get around about 1.5 to 2 meters of overrun after you've cranked the pedals, which on this surface really helps. You give it a crank, the rear wheel keeps on spinning and you can use the bike momentum to climb over the rocks. And they've also recently introduced a more sensitive motor engagement. So as soon as you kind of get some pressure on the pedals and the motor engages, it gives drive virtually instantly. Whereas when I rode it here last year, there was a little bit of a lag and it took a while for the motor power to kick in. And that was actually quite difficult to tackle climbs like this because you didn't get that instant motor torque and the overrun was non-existent. The motor power in the gears 1 to 4 is 160 Newton meters, which is like really powerful. And as you start going through the gears, it decreases a little bit, but the average power is around 85 Newton meters between the 12 gears. Now, I've been quite interested to try this climb here. It's a very technical, steep and loose climb. It's called the Impossible Climb in Finale. And on the bike, I've attempted it a few times and I'm struggling a little bit. And I think it comes down to the chainstay size. It's 440 mil across all of the sizes, and this is an XL bike, and I'm finding the front wants to just lift up a little bit too eager compared to something that's a bit longer out the rear. Now this is a really extreme climb. Actually, it's used in the Enduro World Series climbing stages. It's really tough. There is a compromise on the climbing with the shorter rear end, but it does make it more lively going down and actually corners and gets around some really tight stuff quite easily. I would like to see some size specific chainstays though. I would prefer to have seen like a 450 or 455 or some kind of adjustability, especially for the bigger sizes, to help with these super techie climbs, because the motor is really capable. It's got loads of punch and lots of power to get up these super steep climbs with very low cadence. I have to get my weight so far forward to stop the front lifting up. If you can kind of get that technique right, there's a lot of torque and punch from the motor. Balance is hard on these steeper ones and really wants to lift the front up, but if you can play it right, maybe a bit of extra pressure in the shock or even locked out might help. But the Impossible Climb is doable. Took me more than one attempt, to be fair, to get up there. But the motor punch is good. It's a little bit unpredictable sometimes around the overrun and how it's going to deliver the power. But I think it's just getting used to it. Just getting used to the pinion motor once again. It's plenty powerful enough in gears 1 to 4. The overrun just gives enough when you get into those slab sections. Just you can stop pedaling to avoid bottoming out the pedal, the crank arm, and the motor just gives you enough to propel you. I'm not 100% confident on it giving the same amount of overrun all the time. It seems to be dictated by how much of a crank you give it. But, I mean, considering I've only been riding the bike for a few hours, I'm pretty happy with that. I do like to conquer these technical climbs, and I reckon with a bit more practice I could do it in a single go from the bottom. Maybe it needs a little bit of rain on it because it is super loose in these conditions. But, I don't know, part of e-biking is trying things and getting better at things, and climbing I find just as fun as going down, especially when you've got a super powerful motor, massive batteries, and you know, things that are hard to walk up, let alone ride a bike up. I think that's all part of the spirit of e-mountain biking, climbing and getting up things you never thought were possible.
When it's pointed downhill, the Tronic feels very composed and very quiet, like properly silent. The rear suspension's a 4-bar linkage and it's genuinely a real highlight of the bike. It's nice and supple off the top and it tracks the ground well and it stays active, and I put a lot of that down to the weight being removed from the back wheel and added central to the bike. The 64-degree head angle strikes a good balance. It gives confidence on the steep stuff without making it feel lazy or overly slack. It still wants to turn, and it's easy to place the front wheel exactly where you want it.
So the bike with 160 on the front and the rear, it's designed as a trail bike. It's kind of on the edge of some of the more technical stuff here in terms of what its use case is, but it can certainly make its way down some of the techie trails in Finale. Mullet, so we've got 27.5 on the rear with 440mm chainstay, which is not normally my preference, but actually going down some of the tight and the twistier stuff, you can quite easily carve the bike around and just get that rear to follow round and not like snag up on rocks and some of the roots. So it's quite lively and quite active with the 160 front and rear. It's getting to the edge of its use case really on some of the more rocky, steep stuff. 64-degree head angle, a little bit twitchier on some of the like really gnarly rock gardens, but actually on the whole it's been quite a lively and playful bike. And the rear suspension tune is excellent. It's got this 4-bar layout with like a horse link on the chainstay quite low down, but it's beautifully kind of designed, and the way it drives the rear shock, I can see I've still got a little bit of the stroke left, so I've not bottomed out the shock, but it feels nice and lively and really active and agile. Now I have noticed that the seat post is quite high, even though you can fully slam the dropper. It's a 490 seat tube in XL, and I felt like the seat getting in the way, the saddle getting in the way. I'm not a particular fan of the design of the saddle, to be honest with you. It does tend to come into contact with me on the steeper stuff, and 490s definitely on the high side. I would like to see a smaller seat tube. It doesn't really matter so much on the smaller sizes, but I'm pretty susceptible to long seat tubes. I've got a much longer torso compared to my legs, so I kind of notice it. Now I've set up the bike with some 50mm rise bars as well, just to get the front quite high. On the XL, the stack's a little bit low and the stock bar is quite flat, so these 50mm bars on here are working really well. In fact, I'd be really intrigued on some more enduro stages to run it with a 170 fork, which you can do on the bike. It's rated for a 170. I think that'd just raise the front and slacken it out a little bit as well. Taking a little bit of setting up, tire pressures had to dial in a little bit. These crypto tails are not the downhill ones, they're the enduro casing and not super soft, but actually they've been quite good. There's a bit of a fine line between getting the pressure right so it doesn't fold, but I dialed down the pressure a little bit just to make it a little bit more comfortable on the chattery stuff. The bikes, when they first came out, had quite a big chunky display and controller all in one, but now we've got this really neat ring controller that changes through the modes, and a really nice countersunk screen on the bike with a color display on there. And it's much cleaner. The original big fat screen kind of was really dated looking, had lots of fiddly controls on, and it just felt quite cheap in comparison to the rest of the Pinion build quality. But this is so much more intuitive to use. It's a little ring controller that we can just toggle through the settings, and it's quite bright and legible to see which mode we're in on here. And these color displays that are countersunk into the top tube just add a bit more of a premium look and feel to the bike. And that, with the electronic shifting control on here, which will just shift through the gearbox. The shifting speed is really quick, and the shifting ergonomics are very tactile. They've got small rubberized paddles on there. And I love the electronic shifting on here. Super quick and really intuitive. Now, there is also auto shift built into here, which is okay on fire roads and if you're just kind of pedaling to the top to get to the trails, but it's not quick enough to react on like actual technical trails. So it's quite an interesting feature that I have been using, but only occasionally on fire roads. So mostly on like technical mountain bike trails, probably not going to be using auto shift. You want to actually control it yourself with this really quick and brilliantly integrated like electronic shifting that you can actually shift at a complete standstill. So when you stopped at the bottom of a trail, you can just shift straight through the gearbox from gear 12 to 1 in 5 to 10 seconds. It's really quick. There is some noise on it, so it just does sound a little bit louder than like a traditional electronic shifting. If I press it, my microphone picking up those shift sounds. You do get used to it, but that is super cool. I love the electronic shifting. The integration is much better. This ring controller does bring it all up to date, and it's just an overall much more modern package. And this Haibike All Mountain is the first bike that I've seen completely integrate all of this new kit. I think aesthetically it's the nicest Haibike that they've produced so far. There's a couple of features on the frame. Notice this cutout just here. It's like a design choice just for the shock to be kind of mounted to the top tube, and it's easy to like adjust things like rebound. It's quite a novel design there. It's quite cool. In fact, the overall silhouette of the bike looks quite nice. It's got these angular chiseled lines on here. Nice countersunk top tube display. And the battery has a plate on the bottom with a latch that just releases the down tube cover. And then the battery, the fit 800 watt hour battery, will just come out with the key. And it's pretty straightforward just to pop the battery plate back on, even one-handed. What I did notice coming down is there's no noise. Everything is completely silent. Got no chain slapping around or no derailleur clutch slapping around. And there's been loads of rocks down here, and there's tons and tons of clearance with the MGU. This bike in 160/160 with this geometry is a good all-round trail bike. It starts to get a little bit out of its comfort zone on some of the steeper stuff, but as an agile, nippy little trail bike with the integrated MGU and the short rear end, it makes it want to turn and tip in quite nicely. So as a trail bike and an all-round, all-mountain bike, it's a really good choice. Very low maintenance. The MGU with its integrated gears and the electronic shifting, just super neat. It is the way forward, man. I love the concept of this.
So, where does that leave the Tronic? Well, it's one of the quietest bikes I've ridden. No chain slap, no derailleur noise, just tyre noise and trail. Overall, it's a really solid all-rounder. The rear suspension is nice and supple, and while it starts to reach its limits on some of the steeper, rougher stuff in Finale, it still holds its own. It's agile and easy to throw around, and with that short rear end, it wants to turn in and carve corners. As a trail bike, or more broadly an all-mountain machine, the Tronic delivers. It's quiet, low maintenance, and the MGU with its integrated gearing just makes a lot of sense. Once you get used to riding without a derailleur or chain noise, going back feels like a step in the wrong direction. If you're after a clean, refined eMTB experience that still keeps things fun and capable, this is definitely one to have on your radar.